right, saying Shabbat Shalom. We'll start in about a minute, or perhaps less. All right, friends, good morning, Shabbat Shalom. It is wonderful to be here in the sanctuary for the last week by ourselves. Hazanit, Yael Krieger, and I are here today leading our abbreviated service, abbreviated Torah reading, abbreviated Haftorah reading. But next week, we will have in-person services for up to 50 people inside our beautiful sanctuary. So I look forward to welcoming some of you in person. We will continue to stream online for the indefinite future. All right, so we're going to begin. I'm going to turn the camera to Hazanit Yael. We're going to begin with our morning blessings on page 73.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan לנו שכל ובינה להבחין בין יום ובין לילה. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני בצלמו. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני ישראל. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני בת חורין. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roka aretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechim mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifaraha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten layaef koach.
Amen. 75.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir sheina meina pluma me'apapai v'hirat zemachanecha. Amen. ותננו היום ובכל יום לכנו לחסד ולרחמים בעיניך ובעיני כל רואינו ותיתן לנו חסדים טובים. ברוך אתה אדוני גומל חסדים טובים לעמו ישראל. יהי רצון לפניך. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Kadesh et Shimcha Makdishei Shemecha v'Kadesh et Shimcha be'olamecha U'shuatecha karim v'tagvir karneinu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh et Shimcha barabim.
Amen. Reading from the Eitz Chaim Chumash, the words of Rabbi Harold Kushner in the commentary on the bottom parts of the page, commenting on Leviticus 14, Metzora, the tzaraat, the disease that people were stricken with, had to be outside the camp. Kushner mentions that this offering included cedar wood, from the tallest and strongest of all plants, and hyssop, a kind of grass, the smallest and most vulnerable of all growing things. This was to symbolize the leveling power of illness, which afflicts the powerful and the powerless alike, and to teach the mighty a lesson about their vulnerability. The person recovered from illness may re-enter the camp, but may not go home yet. Perhaps one who leaves the hospital or the isolation of serious illness with great relief is not yet fully oneself, not quite ready to resume the routines and responsibilities of normal life, home, and family. These ancient lessons still applicable once again today. Yehi Ratzon, page 84.
Yehi Ratzon lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu Avotenu, shetitan chalkenu b'toratecha v'niyeh mitalmidav shel Aharon Kohen, ohev shalom v'rodef shalom, ohev et habriot u'mekorban laTorah.
We turn now to the Psalm for Shabbat. That can be found on page 87.
Mizmor shir lehayom haShabbat, tov lehodo l'Adonai, ulezamer leshimcha elyon, ulezamer leshimcha elyon, lehagid baboker chastecha, ve'munarcha baleilot. Shabbat, tov lehodo l'Adonai, ulezamer leshimcha elyon, ulezamer leshimcha elyon. Tzadik ata hamar yifra, ke'erez balanon Shetulim beveit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvum besefa deshenim verananim yiyu lehagid ki ashar Adonai
Page 95.
מזמור שיר חנוכת הבית לדוד. למען יזמך כבוד ולא ידום אדוני אלוהי לעולם עודך.
Page 99. If you want to, you can rise. But again, if you're at home, you can do whatever you want.
ברוך שאמר והיה העולם, ברוך הוא, ברוך עושה וראשית,
ברוך אומר ועושה,
ברוך עוזר ומקיים,
ברוך מרחם על הארץ,
ברוך מרחם על הבריות,
ברוך משלם שכר טוב ורע,
ברוך חי לעד וקיים לנצח,
ברוך מציל ברוך שמו,
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. יחיך עולמי מלך משובח ומפאר את שמו הגדול, ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מהולל בתשבחות.
Page 134, Psalm 150.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, bekodsho, hallelujah, bekiyahuzo, hallelujah, bekvurotav, hallelujah, kerogulo, hallelujah, betake a shofar, hallelujah, beneva bechinor, hallelujah, betofu macho, hallelujah, bemini veugav, hallelujah, betziatzle shama, hallelujah, betziatzle trua, kol hanishamat hallelujah, hallelujah, kol hanishamat hallelujah, hallelujah. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.
We jump to page 143 now. 143.
Nishmat kol chai, tivarech Hashemcha Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ruach kol basarcha. Mi yidmelach u'mi yishvelach u'mi yarach lach el hagadol gibur anochai el elyon koneh shamayim v'haaretz nehalel cham shabechacha v'erecham v'erech Hashem kodshecha kamor leDavid barchi nafshi et Adonai v'chol provai et Shem kodsho ha'el b'tchatzimot uzecha Hagadol b'chod shemecha, hagibor l'nesach l'nora b'noratecha, hamelech hayoshev al kisecha v'nisa, shochen ad maharom v'kadosh shemo.
We're on 149.
U'makalot revivot amcha beit Yisrael sheken chovat kol hayetzurim lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avoteinu lehodot lehalel leshabeach lefael leromem nader levarech lalel lekaleis kol divrei shirot tishbechot David ben Yishai, Avdecha Meshichecha, Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu. Brachot v'hodaot me'ata v'yad olam, Baruch atah Adonai, El melech gadol batishbachot, El ha'odot adon niflaot, habacher v'shirei simraha, melech elchei olamim.
We jump to page 153.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, yotzer or vorei choshech, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. הכל יודוך וקושי. אין קרקך ואין זולתך, אפס פרטך ומי דומה לך. אין קרקך ואין זולתך, אפס פרטך ומי דומה לך. אין קרקך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה, ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי עולם הבא. אפס פרטך גואלנו לימות המשיח, ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים. El Adon al kol hamasim baruch u'mborach befikon neshama godlo u'tuvo malei olam da'at u'tvuna sovevim oto המתקהה על חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה זכות ומישור לפני כיסו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ופסקל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה נעזים המלכו העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים מהם הרצון קונם פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמות צלה ורימה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרח אור ראה והקים צורת הלבנה שהפכנו נימו כל צבא מרום תפארת וגדולה שרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש.
157, 158.
תפארת צורנו מקינו וגואלנו.
Okay. 159.
וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ותרה בשירה ובזמרה מברכים ומשבחים ומפארים ומעריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם אל המלך הגדול הגיבור והנורא הקדוש הוא וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה ונותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש ליותרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ורוב ונימה קדושה, כולם כאחד, עונים ואומרים ביראה. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאו, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. ואופנים וחיות הקודש, ברעש גדול מנסים ומצרפים ומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו לאל ברוך נמות איתנו. אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונשגח לנו מרע לאורו ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות. אהבה רבה אהבתנו אדוני אלוהינו חמלה גדולה ותורה המלכה עלינו. אבינו מלכנו בעבור אבותינו שבחו בך אבינו מלכנו ותלמדם חוקי חיים כן תכוננו תלמדנו אבינו האב הרחמן המרחם רחם עלינו ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל לשמוע ללמוד וללמד לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה והארננו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, והחל לבבינו לאהבה ויראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול הנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך, והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות בארצנו, כי לבוא ישועתך, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת, להודות לך ולאחיך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meodecha, ve'hayu הדברים האלה אשר נוחים מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמן. לדור ודור קיים ושמו קיים, וכיסו נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיים. אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, פודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך. אין אלוהים זולתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה ומעולם. תהילת לאל עליון ברוך הוא מבורך משה ובני ישראל, לכנו שירה שמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה די 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 שיר חדשה שירו גאולים לשמחה על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו היי די 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 ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד יי די 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 יי די 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 יי די 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 יי די 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 צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופתחן ומחה יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גא ישראל.
Bible Amidah, pages 175 through 192.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום Yahaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh Shalom, Yahaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
All right, we are about to begin the very abbreviated Torah service and Torah reading. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it now, and then we're going to go right into the song and then the Torah reading by Chazani Yael. It is Leviticus chapter 14. We're reading from Mitzorah. This week is a double portion, Tazria and Mitzorah, the stuff about the leprosy, the skin disease, Sara'at, as well as various discharges and the like. We're going to just be reading the sort of part of the middle of it, chapter 14. It's on page 660 in your Eitz Chaim Chumash. This is the Torah portion that kind of nobody really wants to talk about in usual years. No bar mitzvah family wants it, except that it always happens in April, May when the weather's good, so everybody wants it, but they don't know what to talk about because it's such a difficult Torah portion to drash out. In fact, growing up at my Reform congregation in San Mateo, they actually didn't assign it to bar mitzvahs. They assigned the date, but you got to read the 10 Commandments instead. Go figure. They don't do that anymore. But in any case, it's relevant now because of COVID and its equal mystery that we don't understand, we didn't understand, we continue really not to understand everything about it. At the beginning, we knew almost nothing about it. We misunderstood it, how it spreads and all that. Similar with this tzara'at, with this skin disease and all the rules and how careful you had to be, but also trying to balance that safety issue with compassion for those who are stricken with the illness is a problem for our times as well. And so I imagine that here going forward, we will always understand Tazria and Mitzorah much better than we used to. All right, so chapter 14, page 660, but first just a little bit of the Torah service by Hivin So Aaron, page 196.
Vayehi b'nso Aharon vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah u'nefer Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'Kedushato Gadlu Adonai Iti U'neromem Shemo Yachtav Lecha Adonai Hagedulu La'Gevura La'Tiferet Le'Hanetzach Le'Hod Ki Kol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Ki Kol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Lecha Adonai HaMamlacha Ve'Hamiknasa Lechol Erosh Ramemu, Ramemu, Adonai Eloheinu, Vehishtachavu, Vehishtachavu, Lahadom Raglav Kadoshu, Ramemu, Ramemu, Adonai Eloheinu, Vehishtachavu, Vehishtachavu, Lehar Kadsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
Leviticus chapter 14, page 660.
וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, זאת תהיה תורת הנצורה ביום טהרתו, והובא אל הכהן. ויצא הכהן אל מחוץ למחנה, וראה הכהן, והנה נרפא נגע הצרה מן הצרוע, וציווה הכהן ולקח למטהר שתי ציפורים חיות טהורות ועץ ארז ושני תולעת ועז, וציווה הכהן ושחט את הציפור האחת אל כלי חרש על מים חיים.
Yasher Koach. You can actually fold it up, put it away, put the cover on and everything. Misha Berach. We're thinking especially today of those who are ill in our community, including Scott Lawrence, Dalia Bat Razel, Hazan Shlomo Natan Ben Nechama, Sim Sarah Bat Mariam Chana, Barbara Rose, Lou Burrow, Ilya Oak, Arlene Miller, Pastor Karen Stepko, Karina Gola Bat Hadav Yehuda Tzvi, Lehudit Bat Shena, Shabtai Dov Ben Shimon Moshe, Francis Block, Shraga Andel Ben Ruth, Manuel Ben Sara, Esther Amalka Bat Sala, Ray Ranshaw, Mark Bond, Valerie Levy, Missy Rosen, Albert Alter, Rosie Gurman, Leah Bat Shimon Lazar, Catherine Callahan Klein, Chaim Ben Sarah. If you have any other names that you're thinking of, go ahead and say them to yourself right now. Misha Berach, Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel v'Leah, Yivarech, v'Yirapeh et hacholim. Elna Rifana lahem, Elna Rifana, Misha Berach, Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel v'Leah, v'Yivarech, v'Yirapeh et hacholim. May God bless and heal all those who are ill, and may we continue to be with them in their time of need. The Haftarah, 2 Kings, chapter 7, page 676. 5 Torah Haftarah, this one, 5-star Haftarah. Fascinating story taking place during war. The connection to the Torah portion, the Parsha, is it has to do with lepers. Lepers are outside the city, outside the camp, in order to heal and not spread the disease. But it happens at a time where there is a war going on with Syria. Aram is the word you will hear for Syria, so sometimes it's translated as Aramaeans, but it's the same as Syrians. These lepers are outside the camp, and they don't know what to do because they're about to starve to death. The city of Jerusalem, or actually it may not even be Jerusalem, whatever city, because this is the northern kingdom of Israel, so it's Samaria. The city is under siege, and they can't go back to the city. Even if they manage to get in as lepers, they will continue to starve. They can't go back to the Syrians because they'll probably die or at least enslaved, but that's what they decide to do. They throw themselves on the mercy of Aram, of Syria, of the Aramaeans, except that when they get there, they find that the Syrian war camp has been totally deserted. And it's been deserted because they thought they were losing the battle. Great sounds of horses and the like, even though it was a very small amount of horses and troops, they believed it was more, so they fled. So the irony here is that the lepers saved the day. They realize that the war is over, and they can then go back to the city, inform the king, and realize that the Israelites are going to be okay. So that's the context I'm going to be talking about in the Haftarah. That's why I went into a little bit of explanation about it. I guess the theme is that the most unlikely heroes become the heroes, the lepers, and that they do the right thing. They could have just looted the camp. Instead, they go back, they tell their own people, we're going to be okay. I'm going to be reading verses 3 through 10. וארבעה אנשים היו מצורעים פתח השער, ויאמרו איש אל רעהו, מה אנחנו יושבים פה עד מתנו? אם אמרנו נבוא עיר ורעה בעיר, ומתנו שם, ואם ישבנו פה ומתנו, ועתה לכו ונפלא אל מחנה ארם, אם יחיונו נחיה, ואם ימיתונו ומתנו. ויקומו ונשף לבוא אל מחנה ארם, ויבואו עד קצה מחנה ארם, והנה אין שם איש. ואדוני השמיע את מחנה ארם, וכל רכב, כל סוס, וכל חיל גדול, ויאמרו איש אל אחיו, הנה שכר עלינו מלך ישראל אל מלכי החיתים ואת מלכי מצרים לבוא עלינו. ויקומו ונשאו ונשף, ויעזבו את אוהליהם ואת סוסיהם ואת חמוריהם, המחנה כאשר היא. וינוסו אל נפשם, ויבואו המצרים האלה עד קצה המחנה, ויבואו אל אוהל אחד, ויאכלו וישתו, ויישאו משם כסף וזהב ובגדים, וילכו ויטמינו, וישובו ויבואו אל אוהל אחר, ויצאו משם וילכו ויטמינו. ויאמרו איש אל רעהו, לא כן אנחנו עושים היום הזה יום בשרה הוא, ואנחנו מחשים והקינו עד אור הבוקר, ומצאנו עוון. ועתה לכו ונבואה ונגידה בית המלך. ויבואו ויקראו אל סוער העיר, ויגידו להם לאמור, באנו אל מחנה ארם, והנה את שם איש וכל אדם, כי אם הסוס אסור והחמור אסור, ואוהלים כאשר המה. Lots of horses. Prayer for Israel and Mazel Tov to Israel on their birthday of what I guess is 74 years, is that right? 73 years? Thank you. All right. So prayer for the state of Israel. It's on back in the Siddur, page 224. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. Our Av that is in heaven, Rock of Israel and its Redeemer, bless the state of Israel, the first flowering of our redemption. Shield her with the wings of your loving kindness, spread over her the shelter of your peace. Send your light and your truth to her heads of state. Her ministers and her advisors, restore them with good counsel before you. Strengthen the hands of those who defend your holy land. Bequeath to them our God's salvation, adorn them with a crown of triumph, and grant peace in the land and eternal joy to its inhabitants. And let us say, Amen. And we're going to return the Torah to the ark. I don't know if you can put the cover on and bring it all the way up there.
Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al ta'azovu et chaim hi lemachazikim ba ותומכיה מאושר, דרכיה דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו בקדם. Amen. Showing you your seats, some of which will be inhabited next week. You see the little seat covers? Those are reserved signs. They're reserved for you, no one in particular, but you will either sit at the end of one row, the middle of the next row, the other end of the other row. That's how we will spread people out, socially distanced in the sanctuary.
All right, a few words about the Haftorah. This Haftorah gave me a somewhat pleasant memory this week when thinking about the fake out of the Syrians and the troops, and how there were just a few of them, but it sounded like an entire army of horses and troops, and maybe even thunder and lightning and hail, as you'll see in a moment. I was reminded of my father, who would occasionally make me watch an old movie with him. And that scene reminded me of the movie called Gunga Din, which was a movie based on the poem by Rudyard Kipling. It's about British India, and it's from the point of view of a soldier, but Gunga Din, the Indian water boy, turns out to be the hero in the story. There's a scene where there's only like 4 of them, and they're fighting in this war, in this battle, and they have to pretend that there are more than just a few of them, which they do. They make all kinds of noise, trumpets blaring, and indeed, what happens is the enemy flees, believing that they're about to be attacked by a great army. Now, that movie, I imagine, would not hold up well today. Its pace, its lack of political correctness, it's probably, I imagine there's overt racism in it, all those things. I'm not even sure it held up well then, but I certainly remember that particular scene. And I remember my father telling it to me, explaining how this worked, and being sort of fascinated by it at the time. And I was reminded of watching that movie with him in reading this Haftorah, when the lepers, who were part of the northern kingdom of Israel, do the same thing to the Syrians, Aramaians, Aram. Now, the story itself is really cool, right? Just because the lepers, the ones who are most ostracized from society, save the day. The most marginalized people become the heroes. That's the shot, the plain meaning. But there's a midrash on this, which makes it even cooler. You kind of have to like science fiction, or at least rabbinic fantasy. Why did the Syrian Aramaian army flee? Is the question that Midrash Tanhuma asks. I mean, again, the simple meaning is they thought it was a giant army, all the noise that was made, but God arranges for this. They flee, just like in Gunga Din. They thought it was an alliance, the text says, of Israelites, Hittites, and Egyptians. And therein lies the fantasy in the Midrash. There's a mention of Egypt. So Midrash Tanhuma says there must be there must be something to that reference beyond the event itself. So they go back to Exodus chapter 9, verse 33, and the plague of hail, where it says, hail ceased and no rain came down upon the earth. But where did the hail go? The rabbinic sages want to know. The hail and rain are left literally hanging in the air. What happened to them? And so the Midrash says, what happened? When did the rain and the hail fall? Well, they fell in the days of Elisha the prophet on the camp of Aram. The hail from the plague plague of Barad came down, was saved for 1,000 years. Actually, no, it's only like 200 years, 200 to 300 years. It was saved for this moment when it would be needed by the Israelites. God saved this plague for later use to save the Israelites in general and the lepers in particular, who then go on to save the Israelites. This idea and the reminder of it, actually it wasn't even a reminder, I was not familiar with this midrash, but it was brought to me by Rabbi Mordecai Silverstein, who wrote about it this week. In a drash, Rabbi Mordecai Silverstein teaches at the conservative yeshiva in Jerusalem. This is what he writes. This crazy refashioning of one miraculous event to explain another comes to underscore the special nature of what happened to the lepers and to anchor it into one of God's truly great acts of redemption. The redemption from Egypt is transformed into a miracle for 4 helpless individuals who in turn become the agents of redemption for the entire city. The chain of events as envisioned by these sages illustrates the power of faith to transform the individual, the community, and the nation. God is recycling a plague from Egypt. God is making happen a mini redemption as an outgrowth, a flowering of the redemption from Egypt. Silverstein then goes on to use this idea in the context of Yom HaTzmaut, where it took miracles for Israel to survive its first attempted war of annihilation, the few against the many, the weak against the strong. I love this midrash, and I love this miracle. It reminds me of a saying in Pirkei Avot where it talks about the many miracles that God created sort of pre-creation or pre-Shabbat, and they were only going to be used later. Among them are the manna that fed the Israelites in the wilderness, the rainbow that Noah saw, the shamir worm which cut the stones that became the temple in Jerusalem, the talking donkey in the story of Balak and Balaam. All these were miracles created and saved for later. And although this is fantasy, it's a mystical idea that most of us have trouble accepting. I think what it is meant to teach us is that miracles really are there. It just takes a while for us to perceive them. Miracles are there waiting for us to grasp them, to grasp their meaning, or at least to appreciate them when they come our way. Shabbat Shalom. Service continues with the private Amidah, pages 241, Musaf, page 241, through page 258.
Sim shalom tova uvracha chen v'chased v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha Barchenu Avinu kulanu ke'echad ve'or panecha ki ve'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torat chaim ve'avat chesed u'tzedaka u'veracha ve'rachmim ve'chaim ve'shalom ay 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 ve'tovei einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael v'chol het u'v'chol shah b'shlomecha.
Ein Kelohenu.
Ein Kelohenu, ein Adoneinu, ein Kemalkeinu, ein Kemoshienu, mich Eloheinu, mich Adoneinu, mich Kemalkeinu, mich Kemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adoneinu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adoneinu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adoneinu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shekiru, Avoteinu, Lefanecha Eketoret Chasamim.
Please rise for the Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol l'tek gdula le'otzer reshi shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot ve'lo samanu k'mishpachot hadama shelo sam chalkenu kahem l'kohor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehu noter shamayim ve'oser haaretz u'moshev yakara b'shamayim imal u'shchinatu zo v'godhei meromim Hu Eloheinu Einon Emet Malkeinu efesu lato kakatu v'torato ve'datayom ve'hashevota elevavecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim imal ve'al haaretz mitachat einod. Hakatu b'toratecha Adonai yimlach olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
This time we lovingly recall the memory of our departed relatives and friends whose yortzites we observe during the coming week. Thinking especially today of Herman Adler, Janet Bleckner, Harry Broth, Jeanette Estrig, Bernard Fogel, Bernard Freemark, Henry Isaac Friendly, Ida Gewurtz, Al Gjovig, Anna B. Gurman, Hannah Herfield, Thomas Hoffman, Anna Cass, William Klinger, Solomon Clark, Leah Lampert, Harry Laserwitz, Ella Morrison, Benjamin Paul, Benjamin Ramo, Linda B. Rosenthal, Gittel Rothblatt, Hannah Rubin, the young woman who died last year, at this time 20 years old, of a rare form of leukemia. so missed. Jane Saunders, Otto Schweid, Abraham Shapiro, Shirley Silver, Faye Young. We are in the Shloshim for Lou Shotland, the father of Marv Shotland, and John Alswang, the father of Eden Brun. The memories of all of them with us. We ask all those who are in mourning or observing Yortzeit or wish to join me in the mourner's cottage. It's on page 267. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yalma divrach Yerutei v'yamlich Malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayechon Beit Yisrael Bagalau v'zman Kariv v'yimru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam L'Olmei Maya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei Kutsha B'rechu Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran v'alma v'yimru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba min Shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'el kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom v'imroma hu yaseh Shalom aleinu v'el kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Zichronam livracha. May the memory of the people you're thinking of today be a blessing to you always. Let us say Amen. A few announcements. This week, Monday will be Minyan continuing on Zoom, but Thursday, live in-person Minyan in the sanctuary rather than the chapel. You do not have to sign up in advance, but you do have to have a waiver. So you may want to sign up and make sure we have that. So when you get here, everything will go a little smoother. Next Saturday morning, we will be live with up to 50 people in the sanctuary. I don't know if we're going to have like a waiting list kind of a thing, or perhaps the same 25, 30 people who've been online will come in person. Hard to know. But we're going to be here. You must sign up in advance for Saturday morning. I will send out much more specific instructions Sunday or Monday about how all this is going to work technically. Also next Saturday, the davening will be led by Mark and Galvin Fickus. And I think that's about it for now. So we're going to, actually one other thing I want to say, I want to wish a mazel tov to Karen Lamas, who is celebrating 13 years, her bat mitzvah of teaching here at Temple Beth Abraham, and after the service I will be joining the Shabbat Mishpacha to honor her. But it's a surprise honoring, but she's not listening to this, so I don't think that she will find out until the surprise happens in about, 20 minutes, half an hour. All right. Adon Olam, page 271. Once again, thank you to Hazanit Yael Krieger for being here. Or not yet, no, 269. 269, Adon Olam.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Le'et Nasa B'chafso Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'acharei Kichlot HaKol Levado Im Lo Chora Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Hove Ve'hu Yiyeh B'tifara Ve'hu Yiyeh B'tifara Ve'hu Echa Ve'yesh Sheni Le'am Shilo Le'achbira Ve'li Reishi Ve'li Tachlit Ve'lo Ha'oz Ve'ha'misra Ve'lo Ha'oz Ve'ha'misra Ve'hu Eli Ve'chai Go'ali Ve'tzur Chavli Ve'etzara Ve'hu Nisi Umanos Li Menakosi Ve'yom Ekra Menakosi Ve'yom Ekra Ve'yado Achid Ruchi Ve'yad Ishan Ve'ayira Ve'him Ruchi Geviati Adonai Li Ve'lo Ira Adonai Li Ve'lo
Shabbat Shalom. And let's be safe and careful.